I think that is better, yeah. Hello?
How are you, Bayan?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Right, alhamdulillah. We're on air, about to get going.
Okay, I'm ready to go. So you're interviewing somebody before me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So Peter should be on now, and then you.
Oh, Peter?
Peter Jailam.
Oh.
Marwa, your best friend.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
All right, Marwa. Wow.
It's been a while. I only see you at events.
But now there's no events, so we never see you.
I know.
Marwa, you're stealing the show.
Sorry.
Yeah, Marwa, stay with me.
Okay.
I'm kidding. Good to see you, mashallah. Yeah.
So everybody who comes in, we can see them?
Yeah, yes, usually I usually mute folks who are not speaking.
Okay, but it's like interactive. People can discuss and ask questions. Like, is that how it works?
At the end, we encourage comments and questions.
Mm.
And I have the painful task of muting people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's always going to be someone with all the static background noise.
So if you want to share it on your Facebook, I just shared it on my Facebook, and I put your name. Are you able to see that?
On Facebook?
Yeah. Can you look for myself and then repost it?
So wait, what am I looking for on Facebook?
It's on my page currently.
Yes.
And it's also on the Muslim Food Bank page.
Okay. And you want me to share it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Or if that doesn't work for you, I could just tag you.
Oh my goodness. I see myself.
Good. Marwa, she is already a celebrity. I don't know what she's saying, you know.
Yeah, can you tag me? Because
all right. One second.
Oh, this is funny. I never even knew you can go live on Facebook. Did you know, Marwa?
No. So through Zoom, the same account, you can like link it to Facebook, or is
it looks like it, yeah. Like, see, I see myself.
Oh wow.
Well, you can't see it, but that's
but we should learn. Like we should do these type of videos.
Yeah, so we are using a new technology today. It's called redirect. So it allows you to share your Zoom video live on 30 platforms.
30, that is amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, so things you have never heard about or not even born in that era. 30 platforms are there. So, but we're just doing Facebook and YouTube today.
Nice.
Facebook.
Are you guys on Instagram or no?
And we're on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and all the other many other. But for today's purposes, it's on the Facebook. Peter, are you there? Peter? Okay. I don't know who is the...
Oh, maybe it's not Peter.
Okay, so here on I'm giving you a view of Muslim Food Bank YouTube channel. You're there as well, Bayan. So kindly subscribe, and then you'll get to see it. And you can share.
Yeah. So I I put the thing you tagged me on onto my timeline.
Great.
Right,
And
Marwa? It shows?
do you
Um,
see
on
me
timeline?
now? So this,
Then you also have one of the interns. Yeah, it shows. Maybe we can share it on SCF. Yeah.
okay. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom and Shanti and peace be each and every one of you. Thanks for joining us to our weekly webinar, Your Story, A Mercy to Humanity. And we are very fortunate to have with us our headliner guest, Bayan Khatib. And I see Daniel Ibrahim has joined us from Daniel, a good friend of all of us. And I know Bayan Khatib from way back, her work with the Syrian refugees that just arrived in Canada almost 10 years ago. And she has ever since been the heartbeat of both the Canadian Arab, Canadian Muslim, Canadian Syrian community and the wider Canadian community for her activism. We were expecting another guest, but I'm not seeing him. Peter Jailal is a published author, and he was trying to join us in the beginning to talk about his book. Peter, are you here? No. So I will go straight to Bayan. If Peter comes on, then unfortunately we will have to catch him at the end of the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us Bayan Khatib. She's a published author. She has shared her story, and I'm very fortunate for us to have her on the Muslim Food Bank platform here today on Facebook Live and YouTube. And without further ado, I would like her to welcome her to the program. This is our weekly webinar where we have hosted about 100 people from around the world, and we named it after the Table of Mercy, Your Story, A Mercy to Humanity. So Bayan, welcome. How have you been?
Thank you, Habeeb. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, I must say, mashallah, you look lovely from that farthest part of the city of Toronto, as if we are still doing events together and we're seeing each other in galas and events. And
Yeah,
but
those
thank
days.
you for the work that you do every day to make our city safe.
Thank you. I really do miss those days. It's been a lot of staying at home, and I really wish that we can go back to like seeing people and events and festivals. But
And the last time I attended one of your events for the Syrian Foundation, I actually won a prize for my Twitter feed.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think
So
we have.
here we are, fast forward about 3-4 years, and we're actually have become dependent upon this technology upon social media to get the word out and to do our fundraising and to our meetings and to explore each other's lives. So today I am happy to invite guests to share with us their life story, so it may be an inspiration to those who are listening and watching from around the world, especially our youths and those who have been disenfranchised. It's good for us to hear from others what their life has been. So, Bayan, could you share with us what your growing up as a child was in Syria? I was made to understand, and maybe there's some stories around that time of your life that are inspiring, and today you could safely say, well, that story or that moment or that person actually inspired me for who I am today.
Okay, so I was born in Aleppo, Syria, and I grew up there till I was about 7 years old, and then I came to first it was America actually, but my parents sought political asylum in America, and America rejected their application. And now I say thank God, because then we ended up in Canada, alhamdulillah. So we actually also came to Canada then as refugees. My parents were fleeing from the dictatorship of back then. It was Hafiz al-Assad. Today it's his son Bashar al-Assad who is the dictator. And so I arrived here when I was 7 years old. We first landed in Calgary, and I didn't speak a word of English, so it was very hard. I know how that feels. Very quickly, we ended up moving to Toronto because my mom was a medical doctor by training, and she wanted to be able to work here. And they said in Toronto, you could do your medical exams and become a doctor. And she did all those exams and passed and all of that, but she never ended up working in her career, of course, because they weren't accepting foreign doctors. And both of my parents then were, I would say, in survival mode for many, many years of our life, like our entire childhood. Neither of them were able to work in their field of education. My mom was a doctor and my dad was an engineer. And so they did other things here. And so me and my 5 siblings, there's 6 of us, I think we kind of, had to figure a lot of things out by ourselves. Like I have 4 kids right now, and I'm very involved in their schooling, not overly involved, but I help them choose which school to go to and what classes to take and what programs to enroll in and all of that. But growing up with like immigrant parents who were in survival mode, we were on our own. So I remember like doing all of that research by myself and trying to sort it out. And this is before the internet. Yeah, I'm that old. Before the internet. So trying to like figure out which school to go to. So I grew up in a neighborhood in North York called the Jungle. So as you can imagine, the high school there was not very pleasant. It was a pretty scary high school to attend. And I didn't feel like I fit in. And I also had the sense that I wasn't getting the best education ever. Either. So I asked around, and then I figured out that there's another high school nearby called Lawrence Park Collegiate Institute that was supposed to be like better education. And so I went and registered myself in this other high school that was further away from our home for grade 10. And that ended up being a horrible experience too, for other reasons though. It was actually, it was a very, very, like you could say, white high school, very non-diverse. So I think I was the only hijabi in the whole school, except for one other person. And I was a very, very shy teenager. So I didn't make a single friend. And it was a really horrible grade 10, and I didn't fit in even more than the other high school. And so by grade 11, I went back to the high school I was in grade 9. And all of those decisions happened on my own. My parents weren't involved. Like I decided I'm going to go register here and go back here and go, you know what I mean? So it's very different growing up with immigrant parents or refugee parents than it is for our kids these days.
So you found your independence very early coming to Canada at the Jungle and not at the Garden.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you were happy that your parents were refused by the American government for the refugee status, and you actually fortunate that you came to Canada. So what do you think about the debate last night in the United States of America?
Yes, that was high-level entertainment for all of us, of course. And I watched it with my family yesterday. And being someone who works with refugees and with youth, actually, like what came to mind for me was that, like, it felt so awful to me that these world leaders were behaving the way that they were behaving, basically like bullies and, expressing racism and things like that. And then we at the same time, like in my work at the Syrian Canadian Foundation, the youth program that we run is focused on giving youth the confidence to stand up for themselves to things like bullying and discrimination, which actually 3/4 of the refugee youth that we work with tell us that they experience bullying and racism at their schools and outside of their schools, from other kids, from even staff members at their schools. And so I was just thinking that, like, the world is watching these great leaders, and they are role models in what? In bullying, in getting your way by being mean and shouting on top of other people's voices and all of that. So it was very sad that that these are the leaders that we have to be our role models for the youth. And so our youth programming actually, started out, like I said, helping youth to build confidence and resilience. But now I realize that we have to shift from just doing that to actually empowering the youth to change the systems that they're in, and to change mentalities about how people view refugees, and how their teachers and the school administration views refugees even. And so there's a different level of work that needs to happen now, and we have started to shift our programming to reflect that. So the next round of our youth program, right now we're running the youth program, and it's focused on like art-based and fitness-based youth programming, where we teach the kids to be confident and build some life skills. But the next time we run it, and we're actually doing some fundraising for the next round, the program is going to be called the Anti-Racism Refugee Youth Program. And we will be teaching the refugee youth how to, like empowering them to stand up, not just to stand up to racism, but to systematically like change some of the things that they face, and particularly in their schools is where we're going to start.
Ahsant, thank you. That's amazing. I love the way you were able to stitch the debate from last night all the way into your refugee anti-racism program in Toronto.
That's what I was thinking.
But for sure, ladies and gentlemen, if you just joined us, we do have our headliner guest today, Bayan Khatib. She has authored a book about her experience as a Canadian Syrian refugee coming to Canada, and she's been an awesome activist and worker here in Toronto. And we do have Peter Jalal has just joined us. We were hoping to have him earlier. We will have to have him later on after we have completed talking to Bayan. But Peter, welcome, and we are very happy to have Peter Jalal. He's a poet laureate of Mississauga, and he's an awardee this weekend for the Pakrama Writers Association. Bayan, I want us to go back a little bit to Syria. You said you left when you were 7 years old. Is there anything that is reminiscent in your experience in Syria that you think that has helped you do what you do today?
All of my memories of Syria from, when I was 7 and before that are all beautiful, pleasant. Like I remember it as this beautiful place with gardens and gorgeous jasmine flowers where the smells waft through the streets, and delicious street food. And, I was living with my grandparents at the time, and I was very spoiled, and they had like a big, beautiful house and gardens, and my grandpa planted lots of fruits and vegetables in the backyard. And so it's all pleasant memories for me. I kind of remember it, this, sort of idyllic place, which of course is the complete opposite of where it has ended up today. And that's very sad for me. I actually wrote an op-ed in the Toronto Star a couple of years ago, talking about, my Aleppo versus the children who are living, in the rebels Aleppo, and how different it is, So it's heartbreaking, and I wished so much that I could go back and visit Syria during all these years, but I wasn't able to. And so I will never get to see the Aleppo I remember, because it's gone.
And that Aleppo is not only wafting through the streets with jasmine fragrance. Peter, are you hearing the allegory there? Are you hearing the rhyme and rhythm there from this author? I hope you'll be commenting later on. So, but it's poetic. Aleppo is poetic and biblical and Quranic and historical and cultural for many of us, and throughout the centuries. Of course, Aleppo continues to bleed. And many of us that have worked with charities in the past and continue to work with charities, all we are being asked is to bleed the hearts of compassionate human beings while tyranny overtakes the lives of innocent children. But coming back to Calgary, what was your experience like in Calgary? And do you remember anything in particular that has maybe helped inform what you do these days?
Yeah, so when we first landed in Calgary, we lived there only for a very few short months. But when we first landed there, because we had come as refugees, I remember that, like as a little child, all I remember is some nice people had set up a house for us with like mattresses and stuff in the kitchen and pots and pans and glasses. And I knew my parents hadn't bought the stuff. Someone had come in and bought the stuff for us, and there was food in the fridge. And so there was a community that was supporting refugees way back. It's been like over 30 years ago now. And so when refugees started to come here to Canada, I felt like I wanted to be a part of that group of people who welcome them, who prepare their homes for them, who go and fill their fridges so that they can arrive in their new homes and see it ready for them, So it's I lived through that experience myself and with my family. But yeah, Calgary was very short, and then we came to Toronto, and then I feel like I grew up pretty quickly in Toronto.
Well, wonderful to hear that your experience of being a recipient of the kindness of Canadians um, actually led you today that you are one of the most blessed and dynamic workers on behalf of the Syrian refugees here in Toronto, and giving them hope and giving them comfort and providing essential services. Bayan, what was it like? Like, do you think there were those persons that welcomed you were Mennonites? Because I know the Mennonites have been doing this for many, many years in Canada.
I wouldn't know because I was so young, and my parents never even told me this until like a couple of years ago when like refugees were coming to Canada, and then I started to ask them questions about how did we come, and I found out, but they wouldn't remember like the name of the church or anything like that.
I know that's beautiful. A lot of people are not aware that Syrians are not only Muslims; they are Christians and of different denominations. And the Mennonite Central Church (MCC) has played a critical role in Syria in taking supplies and kilts or quilts, do you call it? So when the war first broke out, I was invited by a Mennonite church in Markham to join with other members. So I brought some Muslims and Christian members of the church and Muslim members of the Markham Masjid, and myself and a few others. We kind of volunteered one day to do the quilting. Is that what you call it? The sewing of the quilts that are used.
Yeah, like the blanket with the
Blankets.
squares.
Right, the blankets that were quilted, and they were taken to Syria actually by the Mennonite Church. So lots of this kind of charitable acts have been done, and that's what we believe, as you are well aware, that we're open to humanity. Humanity has no barriers of religion and race and gender. It's just the human race. Someone is hurting in human race, we respond. And that's what we do at the Table of Mercy. We have opened up the Table of Mercy to people of all backgrounds. Coming back to yourself, what was your education like? Maybe you can share with our audience. What was your education like in Toronto, and what were some of the hurdles that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
So I went to, I think, 5 different high schools by the time I graduated high school. So that was rough. High school was not the best years of my life. So I went back and forth, just trying to get a good education, trying to figure out how to get that for myself, because I didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any role models. I didn't have any organizations who were like supporting me, or, it was just like figuring it out on my own. And so I did graduate high school, and then I went to the University of Toronto and I studied English and professional writing and communication. And over there, I met one of the most incredible people who've had such a huge impact on my life. And that was my writing teacher at the university. His name is Professor Guy Allen. And he's the first person who looked at me and said, "You're a writer." And just like hearing that, I was like, what I am, and it felt so incredible. Like I had been writing in my journal and random notebooks my whole life, but I never would dare to call myself a writer. But when Professor Allen told me that, and told me that he thinks my stories were great, it just gave me confidence that I never had before. And so ever since that day, I continued to write short stories, and I went on to translate the memoir of a Syrian political prisoner called Just 5 Minutes, 9 Years in the Prisons of Syria. And I still do a lot of writing, and I still hope to publish more writing in the future, but it's been something that's been sitting on back burner now for a while, ever since the Syrian crisis. Like that came in and just took over my life, and everything else went on back burner for a long time and still is on back burner. When the Syrian crisis first started, like my work was mostly dedicated to supporting a free Syria back in Syria, and supporting the work of the incredible, brave activists that were on the streets, on those, and during the protests that were happening there, and just doing everything I can to connect them to media so that the West could hear their voices, calling for freedom, wanting democracy, wanting to be rid of a brutal dictatorship. So that there was so much hope at the beginning of the Syrian revolution, so much hope, and we always felt we were like this far away from having our free Syria, especially with like what happened in other countries, in Tunisia and Egypt when the regimes fell, Libya even. We felt like we're close, like it's gonna happen for us too, but it never did. It never did, and there's so many different factions you can blame for that. The whole world, everybody's to blame. And
So while you had to put a hold on your writing, you did publish a book on the life of someone who was imprisoned. While you were stroking your pen upon the lives of Syrians in Canada to make their own life stories possible. So tell us about that book.
so, believe it or not, this book was translated and published long before the Syrian revolution. So what happened is my family was very much affected by everything that went on in Syria and by the dictatorship. My parents fled Syria, running away from all of that, and I was separated from them for 7 years actually because of all of that. And so it had affected my family a lot, and so many members of my family were in those political prisoners in the torture chambers of the Assad regime, right? But at that time, nobody spoke about this. It was absolutely taboo. And the entire Syrian community never spoke about what happened in Syria at that time. We're talking about what happened in the 70s and 80s in Syria. And so one day I was like in my early 20s, and I came across the memoir of this political prisoner, but it was in Arabic. So her name is Habeeb Alli, and she probably is one of the very few and first people to write a memoir of being in those prisons. And so this was the first book I ever read in Arabic from start to finish. My Arabic is not even that strong, but when I saw this book, I was like, this woman was in the same prison as my father, my uncle, other relatives of mine, and no one was ever going to tell me those stories. This woman is telling us those stories. So I wanted to read this book so badly. And I read it in like 2-3 nights. I didn't put it down until I was done, even though it took so long. And it was very hard because, like I said, my Arabic is not good. And then when I was done...
Did you have Google? You didn't have Google Translate in those days?
No, I'm so old. There was no internet, no Google Translate. So then when I was done, I said, I have to translate this book if it's the last thing I do. Like the Western audiences need to know what happens in those prisons. And this is because at that time I was, like I said, in my early 20s, young and naive. I used to think if people only knew, they would put a stop to this. There is no way humanity would tolerate the like crazy human rights abuses that happen there. This is how I thought at the time. So I thought I gotta translate this book. And it took me 5 years to translate it because I had like at least a couple of children in the middle of translating it. I was graduating from university and having part-time jobs and everything. So it took so long. And But at the end of the day, I translated it, and it was self-published, and we sold thousands of copies at the time, actually. I still have many copies in my garage, but we did sell thousands of copies. And of course, you know, the very, very sad part for me was realizing that even when people know, doesn't mean they will care, and it doesn't mean they will act. And so this is kind of the lesson that I was left with after all of the work we did, and all of that.
Well, I'm as much as it may be disappointing, your sacrifices and those of the others, including the martyrs upon whose shoulders we stand upon today, will not go in vain. Inna Allah la yudhi'u ajra al-muhsinin. So Allah does not put to vain the work of those who do good things. What, therefore, are some of the hopeful things you see currently that would continue to affect that change in Syria?
So, like I feel like, yeah, I left it on a negative note there. So I want to tell you how I was like that was depressing for me. I wanted to tell you how I was able to pull myself out of that depression.
Sure.
And it was because I realized that, like, I'm Muslim, right? So I believe in God. And so I realized that God does not ask of me more than I can do. And so I can only do what I as an individual can do. And the rest is in God's hands. And the world was created, um, you know, it's this way. And I can't fix, you know, world justice, and I can't bring about world peace. All I can do is live by my own values and principles, and do what I can do. So that's when, you know, that made me feel better. And you know, separate myself from the outcome. And I always tell that to everybody. You do your best, and then you separate yourself from the outcome, because it's not in your hand, it's in God's hands.
Well, you have that's amazing. Of course, we plant the seed of hope, and we hope that the tree will bear fruits. But if it doesn't bear fruits, we have at least the tree to care for. And you do have another incredible person in your life, whose story from a prison and leaving the prison of Egypt and coming back to Canada safely, and who has started a foundation to help Canadian youths to continue receiving hope. Can you share with us the story of Albaz? Is it not Albaz?
You mean Khalid Al-Qazaz?
Khalid Al-Khazaz. Albaz is something else, is someone else.
Oh yes, that's another similar story.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, there's
And
lots of these
what
stories.
is and what his foundation has been doing recently?
Yeah, so Khalid Al-Qazaz, his wife Sarah is a very good friend of mine, and our families grew up together. So Khalid went to Egypt, and he was detained by the Egyptian government for 1 or 2 years. I forgot exactly how long. And his wife here did a really big campaign supported by the community to call for his release. And thank God he was released, thanks to so many people who got involved and you know, used their voices to call for this to happen. And so when he came back to Canada, him and his wife started this foundation. It's called the Al-Qazaz Foundation for Education and Development. And they do some wonderful work, also work with youth and women, and they have different programs. And actually we had partnered with them on one of our programs last year. So yeah, they do really great work. And this is what I realized is, when bad things happen, good things also happen. So Khalid and his family went through this horrendous trial and you know, very difficult situation, but they were able to bring something good out of it, and do good for the community, and utilize that. They started the foundation because of all of the momentum that was created during the Free Khalid campaign. So many community members came together and organizations. So there was this wonderful momentum, and they wanted to use it to continue doing good for the community. So good things do come out of bad situations.
Absolutely. Like the lotus flower rising from a dirty pond, bringing with it warmth and texture and beauty. So too, your story and the likes have done that for humanity. So, Bayan, can you tell us what is it like to work? What is it like to be a hijabi Muslim in Canada, given the Islamophobia we have been faced with? Especially recently, we lost a beautiful brother at the IMO mosque who was killed by a fascist, racist, white supremacist Satanists. And therefore, just like the Quebec massacre, we are still seeing these types of Islamophobia. And it is proven that women in hijab, Muslim women, unfortunately, they are one of the top victims of this kind of a racist, Islamophobic attacks. So how have you gone through that, and what was your response like?
Acts like that, like what happened to the gentleman who worked at the IMO mosque and what happened in Quebec, they're very hurtful to me, because I feel like this is not the Canada I know and love. And I know that so many Canadians are just incredible people who believe in diversity and who have worked really hard to create the inclusion of different communities in our society. But yeah, there is also, like, we can't turn the other way and pretend it doesn't exist. There is this like group of other people who are racist and who will always think we don't belong here. And yes, I have encountered them throughout my years in Canada. There's one experience from when I was maybe 12 years old, 13. I had just started wearing hijab, and I was at every child's favorite place, Canada's Wonderland. And I was lined up for a ride or something. And then, like, before I knew it, somebody pulled off my hijab and just ran away. And I can't even remember who it was or why or whatever. But that was one of the like worst experiences of my life, because imagine you're like 12 years old and you just started wearing hijab and you're already feeling like, like everybody's looking at you, and then this happens. And then I've also been told, go back home, several times in my life. And it's like, Canada's the only home I know. I've been here since I was 7 years old. There is no other home for me. And so, yeah, I think that we all have to, like, this is, a very important part of what we do at the Syrian Canadian Foundation is not just supporting refugees and newcomers, but it's also making sure that the communities that they are coming into here are welcoming communities and inclusive communities. And there's so much awareness that has to happen. There's so much work around the image of refugees that we have to do, how refugees are perceived, what is the story. So I always tell everybody, like, in terms of my work at the Syrian Canadian Foundation, one of my personal goals is that many years from now, people will say the experience of bringing Syrian refugees to Canada has been a good one. Like, it goes down in history as a positive experience. That's very important for me. I don't want it to be something like, I don't want refugees to be like perceived as they came here and sucked our resources and did all this violence or crimes or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's a very important part of what I like strive to do in my work.
Well, that's wonderful, building on that legacy, because our dear Prime Minister Justin Trudeau cried upon receiving the Syrian refugees at the airport in Toronto, and he put on a jacket and the little child, and that went viral. And we know that despite of the negativity, which you always will find on the other side of the fence, the general Canadian population responded favorably, right? Donations and talks and hosting. And I worked with the Abraham Festival, which are church members and Jewish and Christian church members in Peterborough, in bringing about 36 families. We work at IDRF and bring, with the sponsorship program and lots of, we were packing stuff at the hotel there by Tariq Moss. You were at every inch, every event, every fundraiser with us. And I must say that wanting to build on that legacy is definitely an important asset to what the Prime Minister of Canada has started. And it will open doors for other communities as well. Like we have the Uyghurs and the Rohingyas and so who are waiting at the door.
Yes. If we make this a positive experience, then there's a chance that they will want to bring other refugees here when other crises happen.
But the question for you is that what stories do you have of some of the positive things that have happened for some of our Syrian brothers and sisters who recently came and who are now Canadians? And as an example, I know when I was out in Halifax, I bought chocolate from that
Please buy chocolate.
Peace chocolate, right? The Salam chocolate factory. So here's a family that converted their resources, expertise, and skills to produce the Salam chocolate business out in Halifax. Do you know of any similar stories that you could share?
So there are so many success stories of Syrian newcomers who've come here. Many of them are into business. There's, Syrians there's kind of the stereotype that they're into business. And it's true. I've seen a lot of them come here and start businesses. So there's a very popular restaurant in downtown Toronto called Sufi's that serves just manaish, and they're like the best you'll ever have. So that's one example. And then there's a family that I helped to sponsor that came to Mississauga, and they opened a restaurant here called Fette Usnobar on Central Parkway and Mavis. That's just off the top of my head. There's so many more. One of our interns at the Syrian Canadian Foundation right now, her name is Hanan, and I met her. Her family first arrived at the Toronto Plaza Hotel, the hotel you're talking about beside Tariq Mosque, where I used to go and volunteer before SCF was even formed. And so her family arrived at that hotel, and so they've been here like 4 or 5 years now. And she is like one of the most incredible people I've ever met. She has started her own youth organization called BAM. I think it's Books, Art, and Music. She brings people together to discuss important topics, and she was also part of Daughters of the Vote, which is a program that is run by the Canadian government that supports women into politics. She has done so many initiatives. She's had like so many jobs. She supports her family, like her and her siblings all work and they support their family. She's just an incredible person who's already given back so much to Canada, so much. And so there's so many of these types of stories. There's Hani, who is a Syrian newcomer who's actually blind, and he is on Justin Trudeau's youth council a couple of years ago, and he's also one of the most inspirational people. Like, he's a photographer, and he's very talented and he's very active, and there's just so many of these stories.
He is a photographer. You say he cannot see and he takes pictures,
but through the lens of the camera he can see, because it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, there's he can't see from far, but the lens of the camera he can see, so he can take beautiful pictures. And that's how he kind of became popular and his work became popular. And so there's just been so many incredible success stories. Of course, that's not everybody, right? Because a lot of the newcomers we brought here are also very, very vulnerable, traumatized refugees who need a very long time to heal from the horrendous experiences they've endured. Some of them have some of the most horrific stories you can ever imagine, and probably will never be okay again. It'll be like a lifelong journey of healing from that kind of trauma. And so there's just a very wide range of types of people that have come here from in terms of like their education and their background, in terms of how they fit into Canada. So you can't really just say Syrian newcomer and it's like one type of person, right? It's very diverse.
So could you talk a bit about that? Because we are challenged with what's the right term we should use or the right words. Given the debate last night, you know how important words are. So what's the right word? Should we say, refugee, newcomer, immigrant, Canadian?
That's a big debate. So Justin Trudeau used the word newcomer, and so a lot of us kind of followed in that footstep. And for a while we avoided the word refugee because of the stigma that is associated with it. But me and like my colleagues have often debated using that word because shying away from using it isn't going to help anything, right? We want to use the word refugee and we want to associate it positively and realistically. So I personally don't shy away anymore from using the word refugee, and I think it's important that we don't pretend. Yes, they're refugees, but they've also contributed a lot to this country. They love being here. They're grateful to be in Canada, and I want Canada to remember all of this, like, positively.
Lovely. So let's, ladies and gentlemen, if you've just joined us on Facebook Live, YouTube, and this webinar, Your Story, A Mercy to Humanity, that started out of the Table of Mercy, where we give out hampers to persons of all backgrounds, refugees, immigrants, people who lost a job during COVID-19, inmates. Canadians of all backgrounds have come to the IMO every week and receive hampers. Unfortunately, we lost a loving brother who was volunteering at the mosque. And today we have our guest, Peter Jalal, who's an awardee writer, listening to Bayan Khatib on her amazing writing and her contribution to the Canadian society. Bayan, I would like you to move away from the Syrian experience, and let's talk a bit about what it means for you to be a Canadian in today's times. I'm talking about the COVID times. We're talking about today being we wearing our orange to represent. I see you have your orange on your
Oh yes,
icon.
I didn't have anything orange, so
No,
I
I meant
realized
to
it.
say your icon on your Zoom is orange.
Oh, okay, that's good.
No, but we know the indigenous residential schools, children, what they've endured in this country. Let's talk a bit about that. What does it mean for you to be a Canadian?
Well, I think, as a Syrian, as someone who knows what it feels like to live under oppression. I mean, my family did, and so many of the refugees did. So we feel like the plight of the indigenous people, and so that's something that I wish that we would have the capacity at the Syrian Canadian Foundation to do more work with indigenous communities. Like I said, we share a history of oppression, and there's a lot of debate right now around the use of the word Canada, for example, right? And that's something that is that when that debate first started happening, I had mixed feelings about it, to be honest with you, because at the same time as really, caring so deeply about what the plight of the indigenous, it was hard for me to feel like the word Canada has to be taken away from me, because I do have a lot of love and pride in Canada, and Canada means a lot to me. Canada is the home that took so many families in and provided us with a safe place to live. And much of Canada is very inclusive and open to diversity and supportive of different communities. So there's like, I have mixed feelings about it, and I don't know. I think I need to do a lot more, like educating myself and discussing with others in order to learn how to reconcile all of that.
Wonderful. So Canada has put you in a juxtaposition after so many years of loving her, just because you begin to empathize with the indigenous community. But you're not alone, right? We are an immigrant population. We are standing on the lands of the Mississaugas, of the Credit um, Valley, the what do you call it, the indigenous lands in Canada, and therefore we're in the lens of social justice. We are seen as colonizers, just like the Europeans did to the indigenous people. The difference is that our coming here to this part of the world was based upon economic reasons or even political reasons, that we couldn't live in our own countries. The same could be true, can be said for myself and other Guyanese. We couldn't live in our own country. So we had to move to this part of the world. Um, that the Thanksgiving is coming up, and there will be the debate again whether we can have Thanksgiving or not. Is it the colonizers' Thanksgiving, or is it the indigenous Thanksgiving? Personally, me, I have promoted Thanksgiving. As you know, I've done many events for Thanksgiving in the Muslim community. I always joke that we have the halal turkey going. But of course, we know of this history, and it's kind of bothersome. Do you have any thoughts about it coming this Thanksgiving? How Muslims should respond to the indigenous plight?
I told you that, I actually really struggle with this one because I do feel torn in two directions. And I think that, like, the efforts of reconciliation that are taking place are very important, and we have to find a way to be able to celebrate Canada, but at the same time not forget the history. I can't say I have an answer for you. I'm not the best person to tell you how best to reconcile this, like, tension. Yeah, I don't know.
But maybe that's the best answer, because if we don't feel a tension about reconciliation, and TRC and Truth and Reconciliation Commission has asked that persons like ourselves in our communities, diverse communities across Canada, should also become allies and help with the repairing the trauma and get educated and doing things in partnership with indigenous community. I'll give you an example. As you know, I work as a chaplain in the prison. And yesterday I was in the prison. I know we just recently got called back after 6 months of hiatus, thanks to COVID-19. And Nunavut, the farthest north of Canada, an Inuit man. He's been doing like life 40-something years in prison. And he comes to me in the chapel, and I says, "What's wrong? You look down." And he says, "Yes, I just lost my brother. My brother died from cancer, and of course, I haven't seen him in 40-something years." So, at that point of time, it's not about Islam or Christianity. It's not about Inuvik culture, as much as their culture require that you should be in isolation, and you should have smudging and be in your lodge and have your elder with you and pray and meditate. But for me, it's the humanity, it's the compassion to just, he gave me a hug, despite you're not supposed to hug in COVID-19, right? But so these are the situations that you deal with every day, of us building friendship and allies. And our community has to do lots more to reach that level that the TRC has asked us to do. So I'm happy for your answer, because it makes us think. And as the Quran says, the nafs illa man rahima rabbi, was the verse of the Quran. The nafs al-amara bis, I forgot. The nafs but not the nafs al-mutma'inna, but the one after that, the one that is mutazabzab, and is always bil khalqal, and is always thinking and worried. So I think that's the state that we are as Muslims are in, whether we should be, we're guilty or we are at peace, and that's important. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very appreciative of having a Bayan Khatib with us here tonight. We got an insight into her life, we got insight into her works, her writings, her helping the Syrian refugee, her participation in the revolution from a Western point of view, and more importantly, her hopes and her dreams. I will ask her finally, Bayan, what are your dreams like? What are your future projects that you're looking forward to work with, and that will culminate in this fulfillment of your dream?
Well, thanks for asking that, because I recently actually, I've been thinking about a new project that I'm really falling in love with and want to make it happen. So it doesn't have a name yet because it's just an idea, but it will be something along the lines of young women in politics. So supporting young women today, especially from visible minorities, to not just participate in politics, but to be ambitious and go after positions in government, in leadership. So it's more than just civic engagement. It's like a next level of like being at the tables where decisions are made. And I think it's very important, because there's something to be said about women leaders. If you look around the world, they have a very good track record. So we definitely need to be encouraging more women to get into politics, into positions of leadership. And I was inspired by some young women who I've met recently, and one of them is Hanan, the Syrian newcomer youth I told you about, as well as other newcomers who really have ambition. They have this like political ambition to give back to Canada in this way, to participate in Canada's civic life in this way. And I don't see a pathway for them. Like I want to create a pathway for them to be able to fulfill their ambition and fulfill their potential and to rise to these important positions and give back to their country in that way. And so this is my new program that I'm developing right now. And I will be looking for ways to make it happen and for people to partner with. And if you're interested in this topic, let me know.
Well, absolutely. I've been a big supporter of the Daughters of the Vote. And prior to that, we have had the many times to invite young female Muslima to forum from the Jewish community, I remember, and the Christian community and Senator Mubina Jaffer, who was one of the very early Muslim senators, and before Salman Zahid got into office, or even Senator Ataullah Jan, we have been there promoting the political participation of young Muslims. So definitely this is something that is at my heart, and I know that there are many other leaders who would like to do that. You saw recently that who was it? Was it in Indonesia, or not Indonesia, Singapore, I think, one of the countries out there in the East. The leader is a Muslim, and she's made quite an impact and quite a change. As I say, men start wars, right? The women bring about a peace.
Yes, yes.
So you definitely have a role. I had on the program here some time ago, I think it was Dr. Catherine Bullock, and we were talking about the absence of Muslim leadership in the Muslim community, and she said, and I said to her, well, we do have say the Khatija Center. Imam Slimi started something in the name of a woman who was one of the first Muslim leaders in our Islamic history. And she says, absolutely, but enough of labeling the organization. What about the leadership and the content and the programs? So that is something that we will be happy to support you with, Bayan Khatib, coming back. I will ask our audience to ask you any questions. And Peter, you could open up the lines since you're a writer and Bayan is a writer. Could you ask her a question or two to keep her engaged?
Oh, I think Peter's muted. I can't hear.
1 second.
I'm very proud of this sister here, who is so articulate, so conscious of being a new Canadian to this country, and proud of being called a refugee, because gradually she is contributing to Syrians and other Canadians and teaching them about adjustment and how she has adjusted and what Syrians bring to this country: thrift, sweet chocolates, and a life that is full of vigor and strength, and a peaceful people who come here to set an example of how we can carry on peacefully, living side by side with other cultures. So, I would like to know what made you so conscious of being such a good Canadian, because you are.
Thank you, Peter. I think it's the way that I grew up, like surrounded by community. My parents were very, very active in the community, so we were at so many events and meeting people, and my parents did a lot of volunteering, and so this was the life I knew. Like even at our household, there would always be people sleeping over, that visitors from other countries, or someone who needed help for a few weeks, or some, this or that. We were always surrounded by people, and my parents were always helping people. And so this is how I grew up, and I don't know how to be any other way.
Good, because constantly, every day, your whole life has been one of giving zakat. What a lovely thing.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Bayan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very honored to have Peter Jailal with us, a published author and a man that has gone back to, after his teaching here at the Peel District School Board, he has gone back to Guyana to help teach students in Guyana among the First Nations, the indigenous people in the hinterlands in the Amazon. And that's why I invited him today, that this weekend he will be receiving the Pacaraima Writers Award 2020. And it's only rightful for us to hear directly from Peter Jailal. What was your life like growing up in Guyana? What are some of the achievements you remember here in Canada? And what is something, what story is there in your heart, in your mind, from the children of the Amerindians in Guyana that has left an indelible print upon your heart, that has continued to inspire you to move on day by day, despite of COVID, despite of retirement, despite of all the challenges, looking younger and better every day?
Well, growing up in Guyana, I grew up in a rural community. And in Guyana, I practiced multiculturalism and interracial understanding long before I came to Canada, because we have a very mixed society in Guyana. We have a very tolerant society in Guyana, where races and cultures try hard to live together. And we have very much religious tolerance too. We have right now a prime minister, our president, who is working hard to bring peace in the land and to bring people together and get them to work hard and to be honest and to build a culture of multiculturalism and peace and employment for everybody and make it a good place to live. Concerning my work as a teacher, I taught in Canada for over 50 years, and then I went back to Guyana to teach in the Amerindian areas, what we call the rainforest, or we call the jungles, or they call it the bush sometimes. And I work with native Amerindians, native peoples, First Nations, that come from different groups, Arabs, Caribs, Wapisianas, and so on. But it was a joy teaching these children. They came to school in little bateaus and boats, and they paddled to school. There were no buses there, or there are no cars. And they paddle and they live in harmony with nature. And then when they get out of their canoes, they come to school. They're very peaceful. They're very peaceful people, and they're very natural people. They live on the land. They live on the food that they grow, the cassava and plantain, bananas and yams, and they fish from the rivers, and they live a very happy life, and they live a life of a very natural life, because all their foods are organically grown, and they don't give any discipline problems. They don't fight. They live very peaceful lives, and it's a joy to work and teach with them, because they're not violent. Because we have violence in the world today everywhere you go, with adults and politicians and army people, soldiers, and all that. The world can be a very violent place. So we need children and people. We have to model a whole way of life of peace, that we can all live in peace.
Peter, tell us about your works, your literary works, that you were awarded by the city of Mississauga a few years ago for your work. Tell us some of the books you have published. And if you could kindly read one of the poems from your books, that would even be more entertaining. and dedicate that one to Bayan Khatib.
Yes. This book here, I wrote with Ian McDonald. This is the latest poetry book, People of Guyana, right? And Ian and I wrote this book together as a team. And I have here a poem from a lady I met in Skeldon. And she's an older lady, and her name is Khatun. Khatun from Skeldon. Too tired to move about at 80, she sits down on her steps to rest. Once she was the fastest, cleanest leader of her gang, crop after crop, cleaning and molding sugarcane roots for Booker Brothers, Bacallan and Company. Now she sits on the dung heap of estate life, looking on, brushing flies, abandoned by Guyanese, by friends, by family. She laments with proper work hard. We can root, plant, garden, mine fowl, mine picnic, buy house, repair house, married picnic. Now me sit down after I finish all my work on earth and I'm ready to die. And this is a lady named Khatun whose children are Kadir and Bibi and very nice. Yes. So this is about people in Guyana and the poem is, and the book is called People of Guyana. So there are different peoples that you write about, that I write about. Yeah. Old people, people who come from different races in Guyana and different religions. And with this new president we have here, Dr. Ali, I hope that he is very magnetic in bringing the country to live together, because I believe in unity. And this poem is called One Guyana. Guyana is my El Dorado, not India or Africa, not China or Portugal, England or North America. Land of cane fields, rice fields, and farms, fertilized by our ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears. Land of mighty rivers, fresh lakes, and beautiful waterfalls, natural beauty everywhere. Land of my childhood friends, Cambridge and Campbell, Cannes and Kissoon, the Silva and Fu. I borrowed marble holes into this land, made the sign of the cross on sticky wickets, slept in rice paddies, poor straws on a million Guyana stars. After the lantern of the night was gone, I paddled my own canoe along swift creeks and canals, feel for pathway, putta mud water, mudhead that I am. I ran in open savanna, catch canary and bleed balata, and glued to this land forever and forever. And this is the Guyana that I envision this new president will bring.
Beautiful. What does blep balata means?
Oh, it's the gum from the tree. That it's a gum from the tree, a sticky gum, like chewing gum. They make chewing gum from a tree too. That you get the water from the tree. It's not a water. It's very bleed. Balata it's called, and it's used to make ball or make clothes or to make chairs or so.
Yeah, it's as a gummy substance that you make even decorated items and toys and.
That's right.
I remember you have like little fingering men and women and.
Yes.
So Bayan, you get a chance now to ask Peter a question, and to comment on his poetry.
Well, that was really beautiful. The imagery, I could just see it in my head. So that means you did a great job. I actually was thinking of a question in my head as you were speaking when you said the indigenous of Guyana, because I think a lot of us don't know that so many other countries, even, like in the Caribbean, have indigenous populations that have also been oppressed. Mm-hmm. And I was just, wondering if you could tell us, I know that they exist, but were they also very much oppressed like the indigenous in Canada, for example? Like, how does that compare?
They were lucky because they went away to work and to live in the forest, in the rainforest. And the British tried to colonize them and to bring them to plant cane but they weren't fit for that. They ran away. They didn't want to do that kind of work, right? So they preferred to their old life, old way of life. They came there long, long ago through the Bering Strait, the first peoples who come to Guyana, right? And they were the first one, not Africans or Indians or white people, but
But
they
I
were.
always wonder, where did they come from?
They came long, long years ago across the Bering Strait when the world was young and new. They came with canoes one by one, and they settled there. They settled also in Canada, and in Canada we have them here too.
But
But
do we know
people,
what part of the world they came from?
The Bering Straits is a divide between Russia, Europe, and North America. It was a thin ice bridge that separated Europe and North America. So they came from the Mongolia, Russia, Siberia area,
I see.
and crossed the bridge into North America. So when Peter is saying Bering Straits, kindly explain that, Peter.
oh yeah, they're Mongoloid people who came from the same countries, uh, from Russia, the Mongolian countries, and they came there because they traveled long, long ago, long before Columbus, and they moved, and Columbus met them there. You know, they discovered Columbus. Columbus didn't discover them, right?
Yes.
So, they were there before, right? But
Mhm.
unfortunately, the Western civilization tried to oppress them and suppress them and don't understand them. Look what's even happening in our own Canada, how they're treating Native people. Recently in Quebec, how they're treating this woman who died a couple of days ago, this weekend.
Right.
That they're not paying attention, right, to them, and they need help, right? And in this country itself, Canada, they are the First Nations. We came to their land from Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from the Caribbean. We came here to settle, but they were here before all of us, and they welcomed the Europeans. So we must not allow other people to say that they're first and they're in charge of this land. We are in charge of this land. We are together owners of this land, together with the Amerindians. They used to live in Mississauga, they used to live all over the place here. And we came and we signed treaties and laws and we tried to push them out. But that's unfair, and that's not the way we should treat them, because legally, this is their home and we must respect that. So if racist people start telling us that we go back where you come from, or try to mess with your headdress or your language or your religion, Canada is a different country. It's a country for everybody. And we have to respect each other regardless of where we come from. It has nothing to do with color, race, or religion. And you're doing a good job, my sister, in what you're talking about Syrian people, that you are ahead of the game because you're teaching us as a newcomer to this country how we should live and how we should integrate and be a powerful country. And Canada is the best country of the world. We're not perfect, but we are the best country of the world when it comes for us trying hard to please each other and to live in peace and to tolerate each other and to respect each other as persons. Because first and foremost, we're persons with rights. Because we're human beings, you know that. We talk about that all the time. We have to respect the human person in all of us.
Beautiful. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to a close, and we would like to thank Peter Jailal. Again, congratulations. We would like to thank Bayan Khatib and
yes.
wishing her all the best in her future endeavors. And we are very grateful. Look for Peter's book online. I have posted it on my Facebook today, and look for Bayan's book as well online. Bayan, you could post that book as well on my Facebook so people could get copies of your book. And again, support the Muslim Food Bank. They brought this program kind courtesy of the.
And I must thank Brother Habeeb for hosting this program, for inviting me. He is doing a fantastic job in our community, in the Muslim community and outside of the Muslim community. He's a wonderful man. He has a good heart, a human heart, and I wish him well on his program. And I will see him soon when I go to other programs and when I go to this thing that we have. Is it still on Saturday?
Yes, Saturday we are giving Peter an award for his lifetime literary work in writing and poetry and education and social justice that he has done over the years. So, small token of appreciation on behalf of our Guyanese Writers Association. So, thank you, Peter, and a good night to everyone. And Bayan, parting words.
Oh, parting words. I never got my chance to say thank you. It's very nice to have met you, Peter. Your work is very inspirational. And Habeeb, thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you to the Muslim Food Bank. The work that they do is very important, especially now during COVID with so many more families struggling. We all need to support helping families meet their necessities first and foremost.
Thank you. Namaste, shalom, and shanti, and peace be each and every one of you.
All right.
Good night.
Good
and
night.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Good night.